Daniel Kinahan is thought to be the one behind Eddie Hutch's demise. Now, some people are wondering if this whole situation could be the final blow for Daniel. The guards are dead set on making sure he faces the music. It's like a showdown. Gardai versus Kinahan. How long can Daniel keep dodging the law? The pressure is definitely building around him, and it seems like the story is coming full circle for this sportswashing guy from the Kinahan Cartel, who got mixed up in shady dealings while pretending to be a boxing promoter. For those of you keeping up with the Kinahan versus Gardai saga, you might remember when the US slapped sanctions on them, shutting down pretty much all their money-making schemes. But hold on. Until now, Daniel Kinahan wasn't on anyone's most wanted list, mainly due to some tricky legal stuff involving extradition and how states work together. I'll dive into that juicy detail later in the video, but first, let's catch up on the latest twists in the Kinahan versus Gardai story that's dealt another blow to this crime gang. Recently, the Gardai have suggested charging Daniel Kinahan with the hit on Eddie Hutch, who was once an ally turned rival of the cartel boss. This drama dates back to 2016, right after a wild attack on Daniel at the Regency Hotel. Daniel managed to dodge that bullet, but his right-hand man, David Byrne, wasn't so lucky. After that close call, Daniel took off to Dubai, but not before seeking revenge for his friend's death. He unleashed his anger on Eddie Hutch, whose brother, Jerry the Monk Hutch, was also caught up in the Kinahan-Hutch feud. Now that law enforcement is closing in on Daniel Kinahan, rumors are flying that he might have fled to Pakistan or Afghanistan. But the Gardai think differently. They believe the Kinahan crew is still living it up in their fancy Dubai hideout, having meetings and keeping their shady business going. There are even whispers that one of the big bosses, Christy Kinahan Sr., is trying to strike a deal with Iran and Russia to help them escape Dubai. The Gardai chief isn't buying it, saying that any such move would just land them in hot water. They're piling up charges against the Kinahan gang to flush them out, and this latest recommendation is part of that strategy. They want to charge the exiled cartel leader, Daniel Kinahan, for the hit on Eddie, who, as you might know, is the brother of a notorious gangster. So, here's the latest buzz. Daniel is now one of the 10 suspects recommended for charges linked to the tragic shooting of Eddie Hutch. Eddie lost his life right outside his home in Dublin's North Inner City on February 8, 2016. And guess what? It looks like Daniel was caught on CCTV just days before the hit, hanging around Eddie's place. According to crime journalist Ken Foy from the Irish Independent, there was a fiery argument between Daniel and Eddie, with Eddie shouting from his window while Daniel fired back. After that showdown, things took a dark turn, especially with the Regency Hotel incident happening just a few days later on February 5, 2016. You could feel the tension in the air, and it was clear things were about to blow up. Fast forward to that fateful day on February 8th, when 2 gunmen ambushed Eddie, who was a taxi driver, as he pulled up outside his home. After the shooting, the police found a suspicious abandoned vehicle nearby, which they think was the getaway car. The Gardai believe that Eddie's murder was revenge for the death of Daniel's lieutenant, David Byrne. But Eddie wasn't the only one on the Kinahan Cartel's hit list for being linked to the Hutch gang. In fact, this gang feud has taken a staggering 18 lives, starting with the unfortunate killing of the monk's nephew, Gary Hutch, in Spain back in 2015. However, up until now, Kinahan had never been questioned about this murder, but now, the Gardai think they've finally gathered enough evidence to recommend charging him in this case. In early March, they submitted a file with their recommendations to the Director of Public Prosecutions after conducting a lengthy and complex investigation. The Gardai pulled out all the stops, completing 1,300 investigative tasks, taking 500 statements, collecting 200 pieces of evidence, and reviewing tens of thousands of hours of CCTV footage. So far, they've made 13 arrests connected to this investigation. This whole story really highlights the relentless drive of law enforcement to tackle the criminal underworld, especially in Dublin's drug scene. The Regency Hotel attack was a major turning point in this saga, ramping up police efforts to crack down on crime. The targeted assassination of Eddie Hutch only adds to the urgency and seriousness of the situation, prompting a thorough investigation. The dedication and hard work of the police are clear, from gathering 500 statements to analyzing a mountain of CCTV footage. Even with all the challenges posed by sneaky suspects and the tangled web of criminal activities, these officials are determined to bring justice. The police are showing some serious determination in their quest for justice. The recommendation to prosecute Daniel Kinahan is a big win, highlighting all the hard work that's gone into the investigation. You can really see how different law enforcement agencies have teamed up, working together to tackle multiple suspects. They even managed to catch cartel hitman Trevor Byrne, which just goes to show their relentless pursuit of truth and justice. The police are like a shining light in a dark world, proving their dedication to keeping communities safe and breaking down criminal networks in the chaotic drug scene. Their efforts are a strong force for good, aiming to take down bad guys and bring order back to society. But here's the twist. An investigation into Eddie Hutch's death revealed that 3 persons of interest took off from Ireland right after the incident and never came back, making it tough for the Gardai to dig deeper. They're hoping the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, will give them some guidance on the case in the next 6 months. One of those 3 suspects is none other than Daniel Kinahan. Another suspect who's in serious trouble for Eddie's murder is hitman Trevor Byrne. He's been arrested twice in connection with this case, but that's not all he's in hot water for. Trevor is also linked to several shootings, including one involving crime boss John Gilligan. Right now, he's serving a hefty 17.5-year sentence for weapon-related crimes and an armed robbery at a bookie's. Funny enough, even though he's been in the game for years and knows the ropes, he made a rookie mistake by leaving his phone behind at the scene of the robbery. It's almost like a classic blunder that leads to a downfall, kind of like the infamous Coxwell robbery. Still, Trevor is considered one of the most dangerous inmates out there. Now, about that explosive Kinahan-Hutch feud. Can you believe 2 close friends turned into deadly enemies? All of this chaos erupted over a misunderstanding. It's a crazy story that spans almost a decade and has cost 18 lives, including innocent folks caught in the crossfire. Gary Hutch, the nephew of the notorious Jerry the Monk Hutch, was a senior Kinahan associate and a well-liked figure in the crew. He had a strong friendship with Daniel, making the whole saga even more intense. So, back in 2009, there was this big-time bank robbery in Ireland where a bunch of criminals pulled off the largest heist ever in the country. And guess what? Gary was one of them. They made off with an eye-popping 7.6 million euros. Talk about a lucky break, right? After that, Gary teamed up with a guy named Keenan, who helped him clean up all that cash. Their partnership turned into a solid friendship, especially with a guy named Daniel. Now, between 2008 and 2010, Spanish police were keeping an eye on Gary because he was basically Keenan's right-hand man. They were like the best of buddies while they were in Spain. Gary also got pretty chummy with other shady characters like James Quinn and the Byrne brothers, David and Liam. But, as is often the case in the underworld, things started to go downhill between 2008 and 2013. Friends can turn into enemies super fast, especially over silly misunderstandings. That's exactly what happened with Daniel and Gary. The Spanish police kicked off some big operations to crack down on gang activities. This one was famously called Operation Shovel. During all this chaos, Gary was in Holland, and his absence raised some eyebrows among his gang pals. Then, in February 2014, a huge €10 million shipment got busted in the UK, and Gary was blamed for spilling the beans about it. Suddenly, he found himself on the bad side of his once close buddy, Daniel. According to Michael O'Sullivan, a former assistant commissioner, there's a ton of paranoia in the criminal world. Many of these guys are hooked on coke, so one minute they can be best pals, and the next, they're planning to take each other out. It's a wild ride. A lot of feuds start because someone thinks someone else did them wrong. This happens all over the place, not just here. After the police raids, Christy, Daniel, and Christopher Jr. were looking at prison time, but they only ended up doing about 7 months since the prosecutors couldn't find enough evidence to nail them down. But Gary wasn't out of the woods yet. Even though he'd laundered his heist money, he wasn't getting much back. And when things started to heat up between him and Daniel, it got ugly fast. Things hit a boiling point at the funeral of Jane Bone, who was Christy Keenan's first wife and the mother of Daniel and Christopher Jr. When friends and family gathered at the cemetery, they were shocked to find graffiti that read, "Gary Hutch, you rat," spray painted in bright red. Yikes. That was a pretty clear sign that Gary's name had become super toxic. Meanwhile, he was still anxiously waiting for his money from the bank heist. By late summer 2014, everything was falling apart. Both sides were on edge, and it was only a matter of time before something big happened. Gary tried reaching out to Daniel multiple times, but it didn't go anywhere. Feeling like his time was running out, Gary decided to make a bold move. He wanted to take out Daniel Kinahan. So, he got one of his pals to wait outside Daniel's house while he was out partying for a boxing coach's birthday. But guess what? Daniel came home early, and the hitman ended up going after the wrong guy. Innocent boxer Jamie Moore. Oops! It didn't take long for Daniel to figure out who was behind the botched hit. Realizing he was in serious trouble, Gary hightailed it to Amsterdam and kept a low profile, hopping between Holland and Dublin. But deep down, he knew he was a marked man. Desperate for some backup, Gary reached out to Eddie Hutch, known as the Monk. He thought Jerry could help smooth things over with Daniel. They eventually struck a deal. Gary would pay 200,000 euros as compensation for the failed hit, or else he'd be taken out. To make matters worse, Daniel also planned to take out Gary's brother, Patrick, personally. After fulfilling these demands, the Hutch family thought they were in the clear. Little did they know, Daniel had no plans to let this slide. In 2015, Gary thought it was safe enough to return to Costa, believing all the drama had died down. Sadly, he was wrong. While heading back to his apartment complex, he was taken out. In the world of crime, things don't always follow the rules, and this act set off a long-standing feud. In December of that same year, Gary's brother Derek, nicknamed Del Boy, survived an attack inside Mountjoy prison. There was also a plot to eliminate Jerry the Monk Hutch. It turned out that Daniel Kinahan had put a €1 million bounty on Jerry's head, and even dropped 100,000 euros as a down payment to a hitman for the job. However, that attempt flopped since the hitman was already locked up. Then came the infamous Regency Hotel incident, which marked a major turning point for the Kinahan Cartel. Although the Kinahans were already on the police radar, this event thrust them into the spotlight, much to the dismay of crime boss Christy Kinahan, who liked to stay under the radar. So, what happened at the Regency Hotel? Picture this. There was a boxing weigh-in happening, and suddenly, gunmen burst in and started shooting, creating chaos among about 250 spectators, including kids. The hitmen were from the Hutch gang, and their target was none other than Daniel Kinahan. This was their revenge for Gary Hutch's elimination back in 2015 in Spain. While Daniel managed to escape through a window, David Byrne wasn't so lucky. He was shot and killed right there. This deadly incident sparked a wave of violence, with Eddie Hutch being targeted just because he was Gary's brother. The Monk went into hiding after the Regency incident. Now, Eddie wasn't involved in serious crime. He had a few minor offenses like shoplifting and small-time fraud under his belt. But he was known to have helped launder some of his brother's dirty money, and had been investigated by the Criminal Assets Bureau in the late 90s. After the Regency attack, Daniel Kinahan's fury unleashed a spree of violence, taking out 6 people, including Eddie, in 2016. In the wake of all this chaos, the Monk continued to stay out of sight. Eddie's funeral turned out to be his last public outing, but in 2021, he was arrested and brought back to Ireland to stand trial for the elimination of David Byrne. In a surprising twist, he was found not guilty and walked free. Before his death, Eddie Hutch was known as a well-respected taxi driver in North Inner City and wasn't involved in crime at that time. However, he had been on the police radar in the past. In fact, he was one of the first targets of a police operation after they seized over £56,000 from a bank account linked to him. Since he was the brother of the alleged kingpin of the Hutch gang, he was under close watch. There was also a time when Eddie was convicted of fraud. Around the same time, Christy Kinahan Sr. got into trouble for the same thing back in the 90s. Rumor has it that Eddie and Christy knew each other and were on friendly terms. But Jerry Hutch, on the other hand, had never really met Christy, at least not in a way that anyone could recall. While Gary Hutch was hiding out in Amsterdam, there were some meetings between the Hutch and Kinahan families. These talks led to agreements about monetary penalties and punishments. Some believe Eddie may have played a role in those meetings. During the Regency trial, Eddie's name came up indirectly when Paul Murphy, one of the getaway drivers for the attack, testified that he was friends with Eddie and had driven to meet him that day. There were even phone records to back that up. Still, everyone seemed to think Eddie wasn't involved in any gang activities. He was seen as a non-violent guy, aside from some charges of domestic abuse. However, it was suspected that he might have had some knowledge about what went down at the Regency Hotel. Now, how did Dubai become the Kinahan Cartel's Swanky hideout? Well, the Regency attack was a serious blow to the Kinahan crew. It triggered a wave of police operations aimed at preventing more killings, which forced several senior members of the Kinahan Cartel to leave Ireland. Daniel Kinahan joined his dad and brother in Dubai, where they lived it up while expanding their criminal empire. Daniel kept up his boxing management business as a front for his illegal activities, forging alliances with other drug cartels to create what's known as a super cartel. This new powerhouse is suspected of moving nearly 300 billion euros worth of coke into Europe. His lavish wedding in Dubai in 2017 was the talk of the town, not just for its extravagance, but also for its guest list, which read like a who's who of the crime world. Authorities used that guest list to crack down on big names in the super cartel. But the Kinahan family's party came to a screeching halt when US authorities announced sanctions against them and put a $5 million reward for information leading to the arrest of senior cartel members. 4 other senior members, John Morrissey, Bernard Clancy, Sean McGovern, and Ian Dixon, were also named for their roles in helping the Kinahan crew. This hit hard, freezing their assets and shutting down their businesses. At one point, Daniel was believed to be hiding in Iran, but as the police stepped up their efforts to bring him back to Ireland, some speculated he might flee to Pakistan or Afghanistan next. However, the authorities thought he was still in Dubai, holding meetings and weighing his options. Before the sanctions hit, Daniel often shared selfies from exotic beaches and parties with celebrities, while his dad, Christy, was active on social media, tweeting about COVID conspiracies and even showing support for Russian President Vladimir Putin. But ever since the sanctions hit, Daniel and the other Kinahan big shots have pretty much disappeared from the public eye. Gone are the days of flashy selfies with celebrities. According to Gardai Chief Drew Harris, before the sanctions, it was common to see Kinahan posting sunset selfies with famous faces. But now, that's all stopped. The US sanctions shut down a huge chunk of their operations, especially their links to sports and the betting industry. This was a major blow, considering the staggering amounts of money that flowed through those networks. Chief Harris also mentioned that a global operation is in full swing to bring the Kinahan cartel members to justice. It's not an overnight job, though. The Gardai are building strong bilateral relationships with authorities in Dubai and the UAE to make sure everything is handled by the book for judicial processes. This ongoing operation includes attempts to extradite gang members like Sean McGovern, who's wanted for his involvement in the elimination of Noel Kerwin in 2016. Right now, he's the main target for extradition, and the Gardai hope this will set a template for bringing back other top cartel members like Daniel Kinahan. "We're doing it for the first time, but there's always going to be a first time," said Chief Harris. "I'm optimistic about the response from Dubai and UAE authorities. However, some of the senior gang members who have already served their time, like Liam Brannigan, Dean Howe, and Jonathan Harding, have been released from prison, raising concerns that the old gang might try to regroup. But the Gardai are determined not to let them hold the country's law and order hostage again." Back to Daniel Kinahan's situation. Why is all this so significant? Well, if he ever sets foot in Ireland, he'd be arrested on the spot. The Gardai aren't taking any chances. They've prepared a massive file on Daniel, detailing his role as the alleged leader of the Kinahan cartel. This report has been submitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, with a recommendation to charge him for heading the cartel's operations. After the US sanctions 2 years ago, Daniel was rumored to have stayed in Iran, but he eventually returned to Dubai, where he's currently based. Because Dubai doesn't have an extradition treaty with Ireland, Daniel thinks he's safe there. But how did a small-time crime group manage to build a billion-dollar empire? The rise of the Kinahan cartel is a story that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. They went from being a small-time crew to one of Europe's most powerful criminal organizations, flooding the continent with drugs, laundering money, and using violence to maintain control. Matt Horn, one of Britain's top criminal investigators, first learned about the Kinahans in 2006 when he joined the UK's Serious Organised Crime Agency, saga, which is now known as the NCA. Back then, the Kinahans already had a reputation in the underworld and were rubbing shoulders with some of the highest-level criminals across Europe. Matt Horn revealed in a podcast with Financial Times journalist Miles Johnson that, from the intelligence gathered, it was clear that Christy Kinahan Sr. was the kingpin of the gang. involved in everything from the illegal drug trade to weapons and money laundering. By then, they were effectively becoming global players, Horn explained. The Kinahans even managed to infiltrate global sports, using their influence to launder massive amounts of cash and boost their standing. From being just another crime family, they had transformed into a billion-dollar empire that was at the top of the game. But now, with the authorities closing in and their assets frozen, the Kinahans' days of flaunting wealth and power might be coming to an end. Christy Kinahan wasn't just moving coke through Europe. He was practically running a criminal empire from Spain. And he wasn't afraid to get creative to boost profits. One of his schemes? Buying pork and chicken in Europe and selling it in China. Can you believe that this guy started with a small-time crew and built an international cartel? Once he had his own money laundering operations going, he started offering the service to other criminals. But in 2010, his cartel hit a snag with a huge multinational crackdown known as Operation Shovel. It led to 30 gang members being arrested. Even so, the Kinahan Cartel managed to thrive. The Spanish police couldn't nail the senior members because of weak evidence, allowing Christie's operation to keep expanding. The Kinahan Cartel grew into a sort of global investment service for gangsters. They became infamous for their sophisticated operations, using encrypted communication systems, a wide network of associates, and advanced money laundering techniques. When someone posed a threat, they'd hire enforcers and hitmen to deal with the problem. A European Union-funded investigation found that the core of the cartel's operations relied on a network of front companies. These fake businesses helped traffic heroin, cocaine, and other drugs while also laundering the dirty money. It was almost like a modern-day mafia. The cartel even set up food businesses as a cover to move drugs and hide their illicit cash. They'd also use real estate investments to conceal their illegal assets. But the Kinahans are known for more than just clever business moves. They've got a brutal side too. According to the European Monitoring Center for Drug and Drug Addiction, they were linked to at least 20 killings in Belgium, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Spain. Leaked documents revealed that Daniel Kinahan was involved in setting up multiple companies in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, including Dubai. These ventures were carried out with the blessing of local authorities and the help of 2 local intermediaries, who became the official owners of a big chunk of these businesses. The Kinahan brothers dabbled in all sorts of industries: food, clothing, textiles, and business services. They even branched out into management and aviation consultancy, taking advantage of the UAE's business-friendly tax policies. One of the biggest shocks from the leaks was the link between MTK Global, a major global boxing promotion firm, and Dooku Consultancy, a Kinahan-affiliated company that's now facing US sanctions. So, what's next for the Kinahan Cartel? With the noose tightening around them, many are wondering when we'll finally see Daniel Kinahan in handcuffs. The road to justice is long, and bringing the cartel members to Dublin won't be easy. But now that the Kinahans are cornered, what will be their next move? Let's jump right into this thrilling saga. It's still a long road before we see any big changes happening. While the Irish police, known as the Gardai, are stepping up their game to gather solid proof against Daniel, there's plenty more work ahead. However, the idea of seeing Daniel on trial in Ireland is becoming more realistic. Despite all the rumors flying around, Daniel and his father-son trio are still chilling in Dubai, operating from their headquarters there. They might leave the region occasionally, but Dubai remains their home base. Gardai boss Harris confirmed this to the authorities in the UAE. Another misunderstanding about Daniel is that he's on the run, or a most wanted criminal. That's not true. The main issue for him right now is the US sanctions. Why are these a big deal? Well, they completely block Daniel and his associates from using the US banking system, making it impossible for any American company or person to do business with them. After these restrictions came into play, Daniel's career as a top boxing promoter took a major hit. That being said, Daniel can still freely travel in and out of Dubai. No country has officially demanded his extradition or labeled him as wanted. For an extradition to happen, either Ireland or the US needs to file criminal charges against him. The extradition process is only meant to bring someone charged with a crime to court for trial. The reason the Gardaí are working closely with the UAE and the Republic of Ireland is that if charges are finally brought up, Irish police would need the UAE's cooperation to get Daniel extradited. Right now, Both Ireland and the US are investigating him from their respective sides of the Atlantic. The Gardai are waiting for directions from the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, based on the evidence they've collected so far. Meanwhile, the Americans are also looking into the whole gang's activities worldwide. But, just like in Ireland, their investigation hasn't hit a major breakthrough yet. To get everything to fall into place, a lot of careful and detailed work is needed. The evidence has to be rock solid to prevent Daniel from slipping through the cracks yet again. Everyone is watching closely to see how this all plays out. Can the Gardaí finally get Daniel extradited from Dubai? With bated breath, everyone's waiting to see what happens next in this gripping crime drama.